A conference and panel discussion themed Unlocking the Power of Taxes, organised by the cross-party youth initiative Next Gen SL, was held recently in Colombo.
This year's expenditure is budgeted at about 1.3 trillion for salaries of public servants. Another 1.3 trillion is for welfare, which includes Samurudhi, health, education, goods and services, what you purchase those areas, about another 1.3 million. So both together is about 2.6 trillion. So I think the estimate for this year is about 2.7, 2.8 trillion. So up to that point, we are okay, because our income expected this year from all these sources of taxation is around 3.2 trillion. But whether we get there is a question, but I think we might end up maybe 80%, hopefully 75 to 80% close to that figure. At 2.8 trillion, we are lucky if we get that figure. So I think after a long time, the first 6 months, the Honourable Minister, we are having a surplus in the primary account. Slight surplus. But where have we gone wrong is on the interest cost. Our interest cost is about another 2.3 trillion for this year. So moment you bring the interest costs in, you have a huge budget deficit. So our income cannot support the budget, the interest costs. About 70% of our income goes for interest alone at the current rates. The only relief I see is that we can get on the interest expenditure we are paying. Only if the interest relief is given by the creditors, can we bridge the budget deficit. Otherwise, we are going to have this problem for a longer time. But revenue collecting authorities need modernization. Our push, I think the government is also looking at it very strongly, is to push for the digitalization of the revenue collecting authorities. My fervent request is to all political parties is the next year is election year. Is don't auction assets that you don't exist, assets that you don't earn. Please don't come and promise that I'll give fertilizer free, I'll increase Samurudhi allowance from 10,000 to 50,000 rupees. If you do that, we go back to where we were. We cannot afford to go through the financial crisis.
Sri Lanka's expenditures are unbelievable. Expenditure on defense is more than 10%. The highest in all of Asia, 14 years after a conflict. When we talk about cutting, expenditures in public service, in defense and all, really why we need to put it in human resources. Move from hard infrastructure to soft infrastructure. We need education and health is unbelievably low. 1%, 1.5% of GDP. If you look at our comparative advantage, it's our location and it has to be our human resources. If you have a monetary policy committee, why not the tax policy committee? Why restrict it just to the finance minister and the finance ministry in any country for a given period? We need continuity in this. So why not a tax policy committee where the intellectuals can come and debate and argue with politicians like myself and then decide whether something is feasible or not. And some of them have to have a long-term trajectories. Let's have a single revenue collection authority. 75% of all the country's revenue comes from inland revenue, customs and excise.
Now why did IMF wanted to have a positive primary balance? Because they also may have some calculations and understanding that within the prevailing system, governance system, weaknesses and all those things, it is extremely difficult to stabilize the other things. So that is why they went ahead with revenue-based fiscal consolidation. Thereby, they asked us to manage your expenses based on your revenue. How is it going to be done? So one way is to increase or collect more revenue. But we know that due to the prevailing system, with the existing system, it is hard. Therefore, it is easy for any government to turn toward the general public. Therefore, we go for unnecessary austerity measures. So having these strict austerity measures, it is very difficult for any country to come out with this kind of difficult situation.
So it's a development. To come up to this level, there were a lot of reforms required. But unfortunately, we had to wait for the 17th IMF program to seriously think about these reforms and implement those reforms. So now it is a time for us to have a consistent policy. And when we were discussing the last time with the IMF is also in the view that this should be the last IMF program that Sri Lanka should enter. So if we follow the guidelines of the framework, what we have agreed upon, the staff level agreement and the board approval, and the discussions what we carry on with our creditors, we are also very confident that we may not require another IMF program for stabilization of the economy. We believe that by the end of December 2023, we will see a very much reasonable stabilization. We have taken all measures to control government expenditure. But unfortunately, we cannot control the interest payments until the debt restructuring process is finalized and until confidence is built on the economy of Sri Lanka. We still don't have access to the capital markets overseas. So once we regain access, the pressure will ease down and we'll be able to manage the economy in a better flow. We are just ahead of the IMF first review, and a successful review will definitely strengthen our economy. It is not only a matter of getting $333 million as a second tranche, but it will be way beyond that. The message we pass on to the investors: once we finalize debt restructuring, credit rating agencies looking at us positively, all will bring in positive results to the economy.